Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to this live team session. Just been told by Jahisha off camera that this is our 40th live session now, which we've been running for our members, our suppliers, and the wider recruitment community. My name's Andy Dunn. I'm Team's Managing Director. And yes, I did forget this morning that I was doing this session, which is why I'm wearing this rather garish cherry shirt today. Jahisha's asked me to ask everyone to give us a like if you do actually like this shirt, because I love it. We've got a fantastic session today lined up for you this lunchtime. This is a topic that our members, our suppliers have been talking about an awful lot across the team network, contingency recruitment. And we've put together this LinkedIn live session with not one, but two of our team service partners. So I just want to welcome both Ricky and Miles to the stage. Ricky, how are you doing today, mate? It looks like you're outside, and I'm sure you're baking hot there. Can you give everyone a bit of an overview of you and your background, please?
Yes. Nice to be here. I am outside in the baking sun. I've tried to get a bit of shade, but I'm outside my favorite Italian restaurant, and I thought it'd be nice to be outside, but the sun's doing a little bit more damage. This morning, believe it or not, I looked more like you, Andy. And I've been burnt to a crisp, as you can see. So I mean, it's been a little bit about myself. I'm part of the Iora group. So we are a company that was set up around 2 years ago, but with a long, extensive history of being in the recruitment world, starting up a recruitment company, selling on, and then deciding to service the recruitment industry with our software. So the domain is Iora, which is a recruitment operating system. Allows for you to, your ATS, your CRM, your multi-poster. We take on more of a candidate-centric approach, just to try and add a little bit more value to the candidates and help the recruiters themselves to vet a lot quicker. And we recently launched Predictor, which is our pre-employment assessment platform. So it's like a try before you buy type of situation. You can do an online, trial shift. So just trying to work with the era 2025, 2027 that's coming in. That gives you a shorter period in time to know who it is that you're bringing in. And our goal is just really to make the service that you offer to your clients as a recruitment company more comprehensive. So you can justify your value and step outside of that contingency, fighting for every single placement and justify getting onto a retained situation.
Excellent. Retained is probably one of the key words that I think has popped up, certainly in the WhatsApp group chats recently as well. So, So next up is Miles from North Star People. Miles, tell us a little bit about you and your background.
Yeah, hi. Let's just talk a little bit about North Star. So what we do at North Star People, we help elevate recruitment businesses. We, work with those organizations to, in some instances, help them understand where they actually want to get to. Because many organizations we stumble across and we find, or people who find us, have lost direction, have lost purpose. They're in this sort of like doom loop. And it's our job to help them find a way out of that. I think the one thing that probably makes North Star different to many, what I would regard as traditional advisors, is we roll our sleeves up, we get engaged, we get involved. Why? Because a lot of the businesses we work with, the owners are working in the business, not just on the business. And our job is to, come in there and have impact, make things happen. There is no point as creating wonderful things, standing on the sidelines, pointing and directing. We need to get in there and make this happen. So we work in true partnership. There's 6 people, soon to be 7 in North Star. Bit of a faux pas on my part there. And we try to cover a number of bases. So it's not just about strategy and planning and execution and mentoring and coaching. There's work that we need to get involved in and do. Tony, who's recently joined us, is all about putting together appropriate plans for rec tech stacks, looking at AI adoption, but coming at it from a very agnostic position. Matt, who joined us a few months ago, he's all about building contract businesses, statement of works, taking that stuff and being successful internationally with it. James and Andrea, who do the whole L&D piece, So yeah, we are strategic.
Forgot Paul.
But we dive in. Oh, well, I didn't forget Paul, because Paul is probably, I referred to him in a post that I put out on North Star on LinkedIn earlier as our executor in chief, which I did with the tongue firmly in my cheek. Paul is just like, he will get hold of stuff and will refuse to let it go until it's working, until it's right, and he goes into businesses and he makes things happen. I must admit, Andy, he's the perfect foil for me, because I love being up there, creating wonderful things and so on and so forth, and do get into some of the detail, but Paul will just take that to another level and make wonderful things happen. And what brought Paul and I together when we co-founded North Star, funnily enough, was part of what we will probably talk about a little bit today. He's an absolute guru, an expert in RPO, in the back end of RPO and talent solutions. And we do believe that's very much the future of our industry. So thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. And I think Jahisha, in the background, maybe you can go and get everyone's LinkedIn URLs from North Star people, and anyone that works with Ricky as well, so people can connect up with these folks either during the course of this presentation or afterwards. So I'm going to dive straight in with question number one, which we're directing towards Miles. And the question that I've got for you is, contingency recruitment has been the industry's default model for decades now. If it's worked so long, why are so many agencies at the moment looking beyond it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a conundrum, this, because like you said, it's served the industry for so long. Most of the deals are done on a contingent basis, whether that's permanent, whether that's temp, contract. But the reality is, unless there's a bum going in on a seat, the agency, the recruiter isn't getting a fee. They're not getting paid. And I think, it serves as well. And I think it will continue to play some part for the industry. Those that can churn very, very high volumes at small margins, doing that, will probably still be there doing what they do with that. Maybe people operating on their own with very small overheads will be able to work within that space and carve out enough of a revenue for them. But the big challenge that we're seeing, and why so many people are just saying, I can't do this anymore, I've had enough, there's got to be a better way. I was talking to somebody this morning who's just going through the process of putting their business into administration and going again. And we were talking about, what does going again look like? But why is everybody in this space? The margin is being relentlessly squeezed and has been probably over the last 18 months, sort of 2 years. People are having to compete on price because, with all respect, it's all well and good, and we all say it, oh, well, we're better than the other people, we give a better service, yada, yada, yada. But the reality is, most time we're only competing on price. And if that's the only place you go, and there's more people fighting for less of vacancy opportunity, it's going to end up one way. So that is one of the biggest challenges. But I think what's frustrated people more than that is what seems to be happening now a lot in the industry. There's a huge volume of wasted time. Time, energy, and effort, and that's twofold. One, being ghosted. Speaking to somebody, then being really excited, motivated, say they're going to do this, that, or the other, and it all goes quiet. Or you start working on something and you've got it exclusive and you've been sold this bloody lemon, and then it all goes quiet. CVs going into black holes. That's happening like never before. The biggest waste, sadly, with contingent recruitment is because you're only getting paid right at the end of the process, and God forbid if you've got a rebate model, because you've got to sort of have the squeaky bum time of probably 13 weeks to make sure you're not going to have to cough any of that back as well. That sucks. And ultimately, there's a lot of time going into candidates and working on vacancies that turn to dust. That's the problem.
But I think it's also as well, Miles. I think this is off-piste with this question, but I think a lot of recruiters don't tell their clients or don't educate their clients as to how much they actually do
100%.
When they pick up a contingency permanent role. The cost of the advertising, the cost of their, importantly, this point here of time. Because I know one of the key questions I wanted to ask you was that, many recruitment businesses accept that investing time before getting paid is just a part of the job.
Yeah.
But what's the real sort of commercial cost of operating in that way?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a really interesting thing that you said there earlier, going off piste a little bit, because I want to come back about that, because you're right. Clients do not understand how much energy, effort, time, resource, skill, quality, ability we put into finding that amazing talent for them. They just don't get it. And we do need to start explaining. But that will lead into part of what I want to talk about later in terms of this getting paid piece and talking about the reality of waste. Industry standard, industry average rather, people are sort of typically filling 1 in 3 roles. And most people sort of, if they're doing 1 in 3, they think, I'm doing all right, well done me. We've got some clients that we start working with and they're better than that. They're doing 1 in 2, which on a contingent basis is pretty damn good. But then hold on a minute, that's still 50% waste, even if you're filling 1 in 2. I don't know any other industry, genuinely, where we throw away half of our product and produce because it's failed, because it hasn't worked. And that's not our failure, by the way. That's the entire end-to-end process. We do come across some agencies that are filling 1 in 4, 1 in 5, some even worse than that. But when you get down to that 20% fill rate, my question to a lot of agencies is, what is your fill rate? Many of them don't actually know the real number. So go and understand your fill rates. That's really important. But, if you're doing 20%, and I use the analogy, I've used it before. That's like you turning up 5 days a week, busting your gut, but only being paid for 1 of those days. That's the reality of contingent recruitment. So, having that level of waste, having very little commitment from clients in most instances, this is a massive impact, and the biggest long-term impact of that, and I know this won't resonate with everybody in the room today, but if you are one of those recruitment business owners that wants to go on a journey and wants to realize some value out of that business down the line, if your business model's built purely with that's like shifting sands. There's very little enterprise value you can create unless you've got massive, significant volume, and 99.9% of recruiters won't have that volume of contingent to warrant a proper enterprise value on their business. So something's got to give, And
I suppose they're also being able to predict what the clients are going to be looking for in the future. Yeah. So I think obviously that's a big reason why we're talking about contingency recruitment at the moment. Yeah. Perm recruitment has been dropping month by month for such a long time now. It's very, very hard to predict. Yeah. Let's talk about building a more profitable recruitment business and what that actually means. So when we talk about profitability, we're not just talking about charging higher fees for doing the same work. What does a more profitable recruitment business? Yeah, of course it would be. But what would a more profitable recruitment business actually look like for you, Miles?
Well, it's interesting you talk about it's not just about higher fees, because it certainly isn't that. And I think that's, again, it's one of the big failures of our industry. We spend too much time looking at the fee, looking at the result, looking at the GP, the NFI, the gross margin, whatever that number is. And we forget about what's actually gone into generating that. But more importantly, how much of that are we bringing to the bottom line? A number of years ago, the industry typically 25-30% of that profit line, that GP, gross margin, net fee income, would come down to net. For many agencies, it's sub 10%. For many, it's very low single digit numbers at the moment, if anything. So we've got to think about what makes us money. And we talked earlier about waste and the challenge of contingent recruitment, having no commitment and all that waste around it. So what we need to do, as an industry, and the people who are on this today, what I advocate you do is sit back and reflect and think about what can my business potentially look like? Because if you can look at what you can deliver, and you mentioned it earlier, Andy, and it's really important. What do those businesses that I'm working with, what is it they need and want and desire? What's going to add value to them? Offering a recruitment solution might be one thing that they may or may not need now or in the future. But what else can we do around that talent space, around that hiring landscape, that could potentially add value? And I won't go into detail just yet, but what we have to think about is changing the way that we commercialize things as recruiters, that it's not all about, it's all on 100% success and potentially you get some of that back if the person walks or you don't like them. The reality is we need to grow up, we need to become more like a professional business, charge management fees, charge project fees, build products that have recurring revenues, products that clients commit to and engage in and partner with us in. That's what we absolutely have to do. Now, this isn't about charging more for any of that. And one of the big discomforts that we have to try and get our clients to get over to allow this to work through is this isn't about, I give you that level of value and I charge you that fee. Over here, I can give you all that value, but I'm going to charge you this monster fee. It actually is working the other way in the industry now. We can add more value, we can add more quality, and we will reduce your overall cost as a result of that. And everybody's like, well, how does that work? Well, it works because you give us commitment. And the more commitment you can give us, the more we can give back, not just in savings, if we're going to be blunt, make it cheaper, if we're going to be really blunt, but actually add more quality and add more value. Why? Because all the waste is going. With more commitment I get, the less waste there is, the more profit there is, the more we can pass on the benefit to you. And you've got to start having that type of conversation with the client and not be scared of it. Get them to understand how you can sell them a 7 Series BMW for 1 Series money. You know, because that's what we're sort of saying we need to be doing here, you know?
It's an education piece, isn't it? It's, you know, all of the wasted time, energy, effort, advertising, and also the poor experience that candidates get when they're waiting for such a long time as well to get through the process. I want to talk about team members now. So for the folks that are on this session now that are in team, you'll know that there's 525 recruitment agency founders in our network. Many of them are owner-led businesses with small teams. Is this something that larger agencies can achieve, what you've been talking about now? Or how does those smaller recruitment firms start making changes like this, Miles?
Yeah, there is a little slide that I pre-prepared that will come in a moment, which will help sort of give a bit more insight, but we'll hang fire with that.
Can everyone hear Miles here?
Can you hear me okay?
Give me a thumbs up, Ricky. Can you hear Miles?
Sounding clear to me, yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay, yeah. There's a little thumbs up. Am I good to continue? Yeah. Jahisha's.
We're back.
Yes.
My
okay.
apologies.
Cool. No worries.
It's live,
no
everyone.
Okay. So as I was saying, I will bring a slide in a moment, like in a while. But in terms of, you know, team members, look. The reality is are you going to go in as a solopreneur or a micro business and offer a total talent solution globally for a client? Of course, you're bloody not. What you've got to do is you've got to go and pick your battles. You've got to go and think about what can I do and where can I do it that I can excel. Maybe it's a case of thinking, what can I do? What my size of business and the experience and expertise that we've got, what power and strength does that give us above an Adecco, a Randstad, or whatever it might be? You do not need to be a large behemoth or even a large SME recruitment agency to be doing talent solutions. We have team members as clients of ours who've been successful doing a fractional embedded model, doing a subscription model, doing a modular RPO. So, but you've got to pick your battles. You've got to understand your marketplace. And importantly, you know, and I was speaking to a team member this morning before this session, and I was saying what we've got to understand is actually what you want to potentially do in the future. Have you got the right customers now? Because if we don't do that understanding piece with our customers, what is it? You know, don't think we're geniuses and we're going to create something that's just going to we're going to sell millions and make a fortune overnight. We need to go and bring our clients into this process. And what we use at North Star People, and we've got 3 of these live with different clients at the moment, we use this process called Kano analysis, which we create virtual concept with the recruitment business, but we take that to market. We take it to clients and prospects and people in the industry and get them to feedback what they like, what they don't like, what they do differently, how they perceive these different commercial options that we might be considering. Because if you're not engaging your target audience with what you're going to create for them, you're going to screw up. You're going to miss a trick potentially. But that feedback's so valuable because it allows you to polish up what you're doing, ditch some of the stuff that you thought was cool that everybody's saying, no, not interested. And it will tell you what you need to lead on as well. So it isn't just a case of, I'm going to take something off the shelf and sell it tomorrow. Do it well, do it right, do it in a considered way. Understand your ICPs and your buyer personas. But solopreneurs, micro businesses, absolutely 100% can do this. And one of your members, one of our clients who's based up in the Northwest, just outside of Preston, I think he's delivering a 50% of his revenue now through management fees and project fees when he was all contingent before we started doing this. Let's start reimagining now. That's key.
And you know what, just to add to that, Miles, I do think that oftentimes there is a misconception that the smaller firms might not be able to do this because of their size, but they often have a superpower in the sense that they're a little bit more agile. And as things are moving, as the recruitment industry is changing, as technology is changing, they often have the freedom to be able to adapt quicker than a lot of the behemoths that might have a little bit more, politics to deal with before they make any type of changes or adaptations.
100%.
Yeah. Red tape, bureaucracy. I completely see that, Ricky. That was a really, really good point. So, Miles, you're going to show us a slide for this next question, aren't you? So this one's all about if someone's working in contingency recruitment only today, what's their kind of realistic first steps into moving towards retained or project-based work or statement of work? Like, what does it look like? So can we see that slide, please, Jahisha?
Yeah, cool. Apologies if there's a little bit too much text here, but I just wanted to capture everything in one slide for it to make sense. So what we've got here is what I believe a potential talent business can offer in terms of their value proposition. As recruitment agencies and recruitment businesses, a lot of what we tend to do, 99% of it tends to be over on that left-hand side. We do contingent work on perm. In some instances, we might get a bit of a commitment fee there as well on that. And we may do retained. And I hate the word, I think the word retainer, I never use it outside of a room with just recruiters in it, because clients usually recoil in horror because they've all been burnt with it. But, there's those traditional retained models as well. But there's temp contingent, there's contract contingent. That's the bulk of what we do. And as I mentioned earlier, what we're not going to do is we're not going to take an enormous leap, 300 yards in one go and start offering a full RPO solution. We may never, ever be able to compete at that level with a talent solution, with an MSP. Statement of works is hugely complex. It's challenging. It can be done and should be done by the right businesses. But look, don't worry too much about the stuff that's right over on the right-hand side for now. What we can do is make some small steps. We talked earlier about modular RPO very briefly. So we don't have to do the whole process. Maybe there's a piece of work that a client needs support with, and that might be around the attraction, the sourcing, the vetting and screening. But maybe they've got a TA. They just need that help and support to do that piece of work. Maybe their onboarding is abysmal. That's something we should be looking at. What about testing, assessment, qualification, verification, things like that? So a lot of businesses aren't equipped and aren't using the right tools and the right technology. So you can offer part of a service rather than just being the recruiter that does the whole thing end to end. Let's think about that and what we can do. And a number of those things, by the way, you can bring in under other people doing it for you. So under a white label service provision. So, there's a really nice situation there where you can actually earn decent money, if it sounds the right way to say it, but by actually doing very little. You're just seeking the opportunity, you're creating that, and you're delivering it through something that you might not be that hands-on physically yourself, by doing that. So I think for me, this is all about what we need to do and where we need to move to. That natural first step to start going into subscription models, which are recruiting. So you are looking at more agency models there than RPO, but where there's a volume of opportunity, where we can tie a client in a positive way for an extended period of time, and commercially, make that work for them. Because I think, ultimately, you need to decide what you want to do, where you want to go, have a plan for that. And it is about taking small, confident steps rather than like, hey, all we do now is perm contingent and I want to do everything. Well, you're not going to just do it in one go. It's about what are the right things to do? What's going to work with our existing customers? Do we need some of these products to open up some new markets or win some new clients that we're struggling to get into? Because, we can't just compete on a contingent price-led model. So that's why I've set all this out. It really is about spending time thinking about what's relevant and right. But don't get me wrong, further we go to the right, it's more complex, it's more challenging, but there is more quality, it adds more value. It's going to be more profitable as a result of it. It really is.
There's small things. I spent a year in-house, right? And company I worked at, there was a big TA team. Every time there was a new requisition, we were told, post a new job, post a new job, post a new job. They never ever went back and dipped into their candidate pools of the past. Like, that's a chargeable service. If I was still on the tools now as a recruiter, that would be an offering that I would have to companies, that I would go in and rinse and clean all of their old data for them, find candidates, historical candidates that they've forgotten about. Like they're completely off the radar. I was obviously a defense recruiter, no pun intended, but they weren't on the radar at all. You could have like representing them at shows or trade shows or events for them. Like, again, like working like a recruitment sponge, trying to soak up candidates that they might not usually pick up. There's so many little things that you can try, I suppose, first to test the water. And I suppose most recruiters probably never ask their client that question. Like, what
the hardest thing, because so many of recruiters and team members and people outside of team are the same, that they're working in the business 24/7, non-stop. So it's really, really hard to have the time to step back, look at what might be possible, give it that consideration, go and talk to clients and engage in what you're thinking about. That is going to take time. And I think one of the big challenges people have at the moment is they feel they don't have enough time. So, I'd love to do that, but I've just got to try and find the next fee. I've got to try and get the next placement across the line. So it's almost like a vicious circle that we end in. And I suppose that's where, North Star, etc., can come in, because we can do that and we can help shortcut that journey, do things in a really punchy way that allows businesses to make that decision quickly and progress and sort of move forward. But, for me, all day long, I think we don't give ourselves the justice that we deserve as an industry. We are head and shoulders talent experts. That's what we do. We know it inside out, back to front. This lady, who's a team member I was talking to this morning, 27 years in the industry. She will know more about recruiting, hiring, talent attraction, talent acquisition, etc., than any HR business practitioner going. And we were having this conversation saying, now is the time to move away from filling vacancies in a really great professional way and getting paid as a result of that, into impart your knowledge, give your insights, help organizations, perversely in some ways, help organizations hire better for themselves and reduce their dependencies on agencies. I'm sorry to say that, but you should be having those sorts of meaningful conversations, still deliver stuff in your swim lane, but what can you do? How can you do things better? Honestly, that you become that talent partner of choice by having those conversations.
I wanted to just throw in as well. Do you think a part of the problem is clients themselves not realizing what they're missing out on or what they're losing by failing to take on a recruitment company on a more with a more wraparound service? Do they not realize what they lose out on when they deal with us on like a contingency basis, or and do you think that there's education not only in terms of the value that we provide, but also where they are missing out?
Ricky, I think you've hit on a really interesting point there, and I'm glad you've raised it. You know, and I'm not one to disrespect our industry, because I've always been on a mission to change the perception. I want us to be seen as a professional service. I would love there to be a barrier to entry in some respects, levels of qualification, you know, and so on and so forth. But we don't live in that world in recruitment. And sadly, what that does mean is people have, when I say people, I'm talking about end clients, employers, HR business partners alike, have been stung, have been burnt, they've been sold a lemon, they've been missold. And that is our biggest challenge, is we have to rebuild trust quite often, you know, with those clients, and softly catchy monkey, take them to a place where they're confident to say, we will go down that subscription route, we will tie into something and give you that project, and so on and so forth. But, you know, you've got to tread super careful. This isn't about, you know, and again, one of the challenges I think, you know, traditional recruitment agencies face is we're used to that fairly high speed sort of approach to work, you know, particularly if you're in that contract temp space. Whereas when you're starting to move to the right hand side and getting more into solutions based work, it's a bit of a longer sell. It's going to take a bit of time. You've got to build that confidence. You know, and this is why, again, part of that process, building what you want to build, you know, taking it where the low-hanging fruit is to those existing clients. One of the big impacts of doing that Kano analysis and that market testing with your clients is you'll have some of them turn around and say, wow, I'd like that. When's that going to start? Because I want to be your first customer. That has happened on more than one occasion when we do that work. But it's difficult because there is a bit of ignorance there. And bizarrely, there are employers that think, hey, look, if we just get this out to 10 agencies and we say that we'll only work at 10%, that's really going to work, isn't it? Because we get mass coverage. Yeah, you trash your bloody reputation, your brand's in tatters, the candidates are just being given dreadful experiences, and that's not everybody. I know we've got brilliant recruiters in this session today, but there's a lot of bad shit that happens, you know. And
where does it start, Miles? Does it start with, like, how do you convince a recruiter to have the conversation with their client about moving to a retained piece of work or a commitment from their side? Does it start with an audit of their current process, or like what's changing in the market now that's making clients more receptive to this?
I think, yeah, I mean, in terms of gaining commitment, and I'll use that rather than the word retain, because retainers, and we get into that whole doom loop of a missold recruitment product again. We need to go and have a proper conversation with the client. So what we need to do is stop. And I know, again, we don't do this, and I'm sounding quite detrimental, and I don't mean to, but we've got to stop talking about vacancies. We've got to stop asking for jobs, and we need to have a meaningful conversation with the client and say why we want to go and spend some time with them, why we need to understand them more as an organization, what works, what doesn't work, what they have, what they don't have. Now, we have, in terms of North Star, with some of our clients, we have built some audit tools, some self-assessment questionnaires, some health checks that agencies are now deploying, and clients are basically being a bit of an open book. But there is a level of suspicion. Why are you asking me that? What the hell's that got to do with you? You know, middle finger being raised by the end client to the recruiter. You know, there is a hang on a minute. So again, this is about, you know, not going into somebody who doesn't know you, but having that conversation with somebody you've worked with over a period and say, look, we're doing a great job here, and you love what we do, and we're all happy. But rather than have tea and biscuits in our next meeting, let's talk about what we can do better. Let's talk about what we could reimagine here together. Tell me what your problems, your challenges, your issues are. You know, we all know cost per hire is going to be up there, quickly followed by quality of hire and availability. You know, quickly followed by managing the process, etc. You know, so but where are those pain points? Where are those challenges? Where are those missed opportunities? We're not having those sorts of conversations. We're just basically, got any jobs, mate? What else are we? We're just perceived as just another recruiter. If we can start having adult conversations around talent landscape and start providing insights, information, you know, start sharing our knowledge with our community, all of a sudden you become, again, horrible phrase, but you become a bit of a thought leader. You can talk with authority about these things. That's what we're going to
ask you a couple of questions about. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, Miles, about some of the acronyms that are on this sheet.
Yeah, go on, and then we'll get rid of this. Then we'll get rid of the slide. Go on.
So RPO, MSP, master vendor.
Yeah.
They sound like terms that like really big recruitment businesses typically talk about, not the smaller, more agile part of the recruitment community. What do all those acronyms actually mean, and like how can they be relevant for folks that might be watching this session?
Okay, cool. Let's deal with the one RPO because it's mentioned more than once. In fact, 1, 2, 3, it's mentioned 4 times on there. So recruitment process outsourcing. Now, as an industry, the accepted norm in terms of when we talk about RPO, it's to do with permanent staff. Okay, we're not talking about contractors. We're not talking about temp. We're talking about permanent staff. So RPO, and the reason why there are 4 different variations on there. Modular RPO is where we're doing part of a process. So it's being outsourced to us to deliver part of a process. Project RPO will be very much a case of, for example, a client is building a new facility and they're going to need it open on that day and they need it staffed with this many roles. And I had a client a few years ago, 134 roles over 2 years. That was the project. There was no contract beyond that. It wasn't going to roll. It was a case of we need you to deliver that, and that's it. So that would be project. But projects don't have to be that big. It could be just 20 roles, 30, 40. Anyway, so that's project RPO. A partial RPO will be where you're doing something in your swim lane. So if I'm the expert at white collar contract professionals in engineering, for example, that contract's a bad word. I should have talked about permanent. So white collar professionals within engineering. I'm going to do that, but what I'm not going to do is all the other stuff that isn't in my swim lane. So when you're doing a partial RPO, you're taking part of that pain away. They're outsourcing part of it, but the rest is either left in its current model or with other providers. Whereas a full RPO is the whole thing. And that's why I'm saying the chances of, with all respect to most team members, probably bar 1 or maybe 2 that I know, are unlikely to be able to deliver a full RPO solution as a single entity. So we go in and we look at that modular project or partial as where we can potentially, build value. MSP
the only way they could do it, Miles, is if they picked another team, a couple of team members to put a group together that might be do specialist.
Andy, there's 2 ways. You could do it as a JV, 100%. That'd be really cool. That'd be really, really cool. The other way, and let's talk of one of these other things, is you could set up a vendor management provision. You could be doing what you do in your swim lane, but this is where I think team members have a huge advantage over non-team members. Is what you could do is actually help your end client, the employer, construct their supply chain using team members to feed into that. So there's a great opportunity to deliver something as a collaboration, but you as the principal agency leading that. And this is where, and I know Ricky will be itching to come in a moment, but this is where, again, all that stuff towards the right, you start needing to deploy some technology, stuff that's going to help do the lifting, do the legwork for you, so on and so forth. Just the final couple of things there to talk about. So MSP, what we're talking about there is non-permanent. So as a managed service provider, you're going to be providing non-permanent labour, workforce, contractors, whatever that might be, into an organisation, typically for an extended period. And full RPOs and MSP contracts typically be set up for a period of time, but have the ability to roll over. So they're not project-based, they're more rolling. And as long as you keep delivering, adding value, dealing with the pain points, probably end up having to keep decreasing your bloody price as well, because that usually starts to happen when you run out of value you can add. Then that's what we're talking about with an MSP and statement of works. That's taking things in a very different direction, because you're not being paid on the result of people going into jobs. You're being paid on the output of the work that's being done. But there's a lot of IT recruitment businesses who very successfully looked at going into this statement of works piece, where they've been putting in teams of developers and a couple of project managers and a program manager and charging fees on timesheets for those contracts. Like, hang on a minute, we can just do that project. Why don't we just have that project and ownership? But there are massive legal ramifications and contractual stuff that you need to be aware of to do statement of works. But our guy, Matt Knowles at North Star, is brilliant at doing that. So if that does float anybody's boat in the room, for God's sake, reach out to Matt and have that conversation. He knows how to do it really well.
Cool. Right, Ricky, we're gonna put a slide up, I think, for you now. Right. And I got a really key question about where technology fits into this. So I reckon 99% of the recruitment business owners I've met in the last 3 years have a CRM or an ATS. There are still about 1% people out there that don't have one, which I think is crazy. Why isn't just a normal CRM or ATS enough if you want to deliver high value recruitment services?
Well, I think, and first of all, I've ran into some of these recruitment agencies that still don't have a CRM or an ATS, and you know, I have to compose myself, but in my mind, I'm thinking, what on God's green earth are you doing? But one of the biggest misconceptions in recruitment might be that having an ATS means you've got your technology sorted, and it doesn't, right? So an ATS is obviously incredibly important, but it's only one piece of the puzzle. And if you're working purely on contingency, or an ATS is often enough because you're just storing CVs, managing vacancies, or tracking activity. But the moment you move into some of the models that Miles was speaking about, we're talking about retained search, or subscription recruitment, or an RPO model, then the expectation it completely changes, and your client isn't just paying you for a CV anymore, so that they're paying you to deliver a repeatable service. And that means that every stage of the hiring journey has to become measurable, it has to become streamlined, and in order to justify that value to your client, you have to have a system that runs smoothly. Me and Miles and I were speaking earlier in the week about what a lot of people do is in their attempt to improve their tech stack, people just kind of go with what's popular, or without properly researching and looking into what it is that they're trying to deliver and creating something that really talks to each other. They end up with some kind of Frankenstein model, which is just a bunch of disjointed tools that makes things clunky. And if you're gonna justify a retained fee, a retainer, if you're gonna justify your client looking at you and saying, we're going to make that commitment of ensuring that you're going to get, paid on a month-to-month basis, and we're going to lock in with you for a fixed term, then you're going to have a smooth, repeatable service, and your tools need to talk to each other. So if we look at the slide, on the left-hand side, you've got what most agencies will recognize. So, you've got your ATS, LinkedIn, job boards, emails, it's manual interview scheduling, maybe a spreadsheet, at the end of the month. Nothing there is necessarily wrong, but it's just fragmented, right? It's reactive, and it's very difficult to deliver a premium service consistently. So if we move to the right-hand side, what you might notice is it's not really about having 20 different tools, 20 different pieces of software. It's more so about building a workflow. Right, your ATS becomes the center of that, and you want to have tools that speak very well with your ATS, that integrate very well with it, so you can provide a very high level service without all the clunk. Candidate engagement becomes automated, interview scheduling automated, clients have live dashboards, verification becomes built in, and maybe even you introduce objective assessments into your recruitment process. And this is where tools like Predictor, this is where tools like Iora Linker might come into play when you're trying to enhance that service that you're providing, because really and truly you're only as good as the tools in your belt. If you're trying to build a house and all you've got is a hammer, you're pretty much you're very limited in what you can actually get done. So it's not necessarily about having a million tools, but it's about having the right ones and making sure that they talk to each other.
So what you're saying is recruitment businesses like sometimes buy this tech without actually figuring out if they need it first. Is that right? Or how do they?
Absolutely.
How would a recruitment
Absolutely.
business then make that crucial decision that it's going to be the right fit for them?
Well, I mean, it's about, first of all, you have to understand what service you're looking to provide. So, you know, I love the visuals that Miles put up beforehand, where it's, you know, and what you spoke about, where you're saying it's unlikely that you might be able to do a full RPO. You might specialize in a specific niche, and you have to understand exactly what the service is that you're providing and ask yourself, what tools do I need in order to make this work? And there's a lot of tech out there now, and it's really about getting the right ones that talk to each other well, the ones that integrate with one another well. So it starts off with you understanding exactly what type of service you're trying to provide. You're not going to do everything, you know, some people do, but, you know, most likely you're not going to be doing everything. So what is it that you're looking to do? And then you want to strategically build that. It's not about, this is what such and such company, Hayes, are using this, so I'm going to use it as well. You've got to look at yourself, your recruitment company, and what you want to do for your client, and research, look around, shop around. You know, don't just take the first thing that you see because such and such is using it. You know, look around and make sure that you find something that's bespoke for yourself. If you're going to create a bespoke service for your client, you need a bespoke a bespoke toolkit, essentially.
I suppose you could use that as a part of your sales pitch as well. This is our tech stack. This is how it works. This is how our candidates are treated. This is how, you know, we can report back to you. It's just makes so much sense. So absolutely. I suppose on that point, like if you could change the mindset of folks that are watching now, like what's the biggest mindset shift that recruitment business owners need to make better relationships with their clients using tech, Ricky?
I think if I could change the mindset of the recruitment, it would be, the first thing is, you don't need to use what is popular, and just because it's right for one doesn't mean it's right for all. That's the first thing, because, you know, there is a lot of noise out there. And sometimes it can be overwhelming to decide what's going to work, what you should go with. So people just kind of you know, go with whatever they see the popular brand using, and I think that's the number one thing. It's like, take your time and look and shop around, because an elite tech stack looks different for every recruitment agency. That's the first thing. You know, and if you're going to get into to some of the models that we've been speaking about, you want to not only take the pressure off yourself, you want to take the pressure off of your clients. So if we're looking at, for example, the software that we're providing at the moment, which is Predictor, what we're doing with Predictor, I think one of the biggest shifts is people are moving away from opinion and more towards evidence, right? So moving along with these types of shifts. So historically, we've seen, you know, we'd shortlist candidates because we like their CV, or because they interviewed well, or because they presented confidently. But none of these things necessarily predict performance. And that's why predictive assessments is becoming such an important part of the modern recruitment. You know, so our software, for example, Predictor, or you know, I haven't seen others like it, but Predictor allows for recruiters to introduce an objective layer into the process. So instead of saying, I think this candidate looks good, now you can say, here's objective evidence showing why this candidate is likely to succeed in this specific role. And that is the type of mindset shift that a lot of the recruiters need to take on. If you're going to justify, you know, monthly retainer, if you're going to justify long-term fee, you need to be able to create a service that takes the pressure off, and you can't necessarily guarantee, but you can input a lot of confidence in the mind of your client that you'll be able to provide them with a high level service repeatedly. that is the reason why they're going to come to you. That's the reason why they're going to stick with you.
So I'm just conscious of time because I want to leave a little bit of a buffer for Q&A. I know there's a couple of questions already in the chat that I'm going to come back to. So, Ricky, if someone leaves this session today wanting to make a change, make their business more profitable, what's the one practical action that they need to take in the next 30 days based on your advice that they should try?
If they were to look to make their business successful, I think that the first thing they would need to do is book a call with myself or book a call with Miles, because what you need to do is you need to be aware of what your options are. You need to be aware of what your options are in terms of your tech stack. You need to be aware of what your options are in terms of the type of service you can provide to your clients. And I think there's nothing wrong with seeking advice. You know, a lot of people have been in recruitment for, you know, decades. That we do have a lot of people who have just recently started, but there are a lot of people who have been, you know, they've been ticking along for quite some time, and it might even be like an ego thing that prevents you from wanting to step out there and seek you know, counsel. But I think the first step is really speaking to people. Take the step. You know, if you've heard something that could be of interest to you during this conversation, if you've heard something that might benefit your business, then reach out, see what is available out there, see what the options are. Otherwise, you stay doing what you've been doing and you keep getting the same results, you know, and it's getting harder. So
I absolutely echo that. Like, I was a contingency perm recruiter. In fact, I won the Global Recruiter Award for Best Perms Recruiter, like in 2012. And I was a contingency pay on delivery recruiter for years and years and years. What I've seen and learned in the last 3 years in this job, like, it's probably been the most incredible boot camp of a recruiter, being the MD of team. Like, I wouldn't do what I used to do. Like, there's so many things that I've learned, so many tools, techniques that I just wish I'd known back then, but I wouldn't have, because then I wouldn't have had this job. But I just think, like, if you're inspired by someone, if someone's giving you that, oh, we lost Ricky, maybe his meatballs have been delivered or something.
I'll step in his absence. Go on.
Inspired, like, definitely, like, reach out. I know we'll be back in a second, but reach out to Ricky or Miles, like, book a call. If you're inspired by something, like, take some action. What's the worst that can happen? You might learn a thing or two. I think the first question that came in is actually for Ricky, so I'm not going to be able to ask him that question because I've just got a spinning wheel on my screen. Have you got the same thing, Miles?
Yeah,
spinning wheel.
Yeah. He'll reconnect, I'm sure, imminently.
So I'm going to ask you a question. I'll ask you the same one, Miles. Like, someone wants to leave today with one practical idea. What would your advice be?
Look, I mean, what we've put up here could be quite intimidating. And what I would say is don't be put off. Probably the best advice I could give is find some time over this coming weekend to sit back and reflect and just say, am I happy to carry on as I am now? Do I think that's going to be good for me for whatever period of time I need to be doing? You know, you've really just got to say, because we're at a real crossroads, I think, as an industry now. And I've seen the work. You know, we're lucky. We've worked with nearly 100 agencies over the last 18 months. So we see a lot of things happening. But what I am seeing is a massive shift away from traditional models. And that's not just being driven by us, by the way. It's just because we're not the only ones having this conversation. There's a huge demand. And the feedback from the end clients, the employers, is phenomenal in terms of the level of service that they're now getting. So I think you just need to look yourself in the mirror and say, you know, is it a load of BS that's been rolled out today or not? Hopefully not. My God, that's intimidating. That's scary. And if you feel like that, then look, I know Ricky's the same as I am, you know, and it's all part of our commitment to being part of the team community. If somebody just wants to pick up the phone and just literally chew the fat for another half an hour, one-to-one, on stuff that we've talked about, I know that I'll be happy to do that, and I know that he'll be happy to do that. Because you've got to decide what your future looks like. You know, what do you want it to be? It's not about everything that was on that slide I put up. Are there just 2 or 3 things there that would really make a difference for me and for my business? But it is about the why as well, because there might be people in this room that, you know, have got a couple of years to go and then they're done. And so it's all about revenue generation and fee income for 24 months, 48 months, whatever it is. There are others who want to build value. So it depends on what you want to achieve for yourself as to what journey you need to go on. Don't just think, oh, I'm going to do that because that sounds good, or somebody else is doing that and I'd like a piece of that as well. You've got to just reinvent and reimagine. Now's the time to do it. Otherwise, I fear if it just drifts further, it's only going to get harder, I think, the sector, you know, it really is.
I think, like with all change, like change is uncomfortable, and you probably will feel like anxious about changing your business model, or even asking clients, like maybe even clients that are like mates that you've known for years and years. Like, actually, I'm thinking about changing the way that I work, and this is my new idea. Like, do you think it would work within the business? Can we test it with you? Like, there's always great places like that to start, but it will be uncomfortable, I think, at the start. But you know,
absolutely it will. But there are big things that can happen. And just one thing I want to sort of say, you know, we had a client that went out to market and did a subscription model, recruiting at less than 8%. And that sounds terrifying, doesn't it? But hang on a minute, that agency was working at an average fee of just under 15%, and they were filling 1 in 4 vacancies. So actually working at 8% with full commitment,
making more money,
hugely more profitable, because we got rid of all that waste. You know, and if you can go to a client and say, I can show you a way to reduce, if they say my average agency fee is 15, 16, whatever, I can find a way to halve that for you over the next 12 months. Can we have a proper conversation about what that could look like? I don't know many people that won't. Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
It's like, oh look, Ricky's just bounced back. Have you sat in the sun too long, mate, with that bloody laptop?
I think my laptop's been in the sun too long. That's what's happening.
Yeah, I agree with you. Ricky, we got one question that's been shot into you. So from Zach Leak. So Zach's asked you, if I was speaking to a recruitment company or an employer and they asked why they should use Predictor, what would you say is the strongest selling point? What makes Predictor stand out from other pre-employment assessment platforms? And why should an agency or employer choose it over an alternative?
Well, that's a very detailed question. And it's a very good one, actually. I think that in terms of pre-employment assessments, you've got personality tests and you've got things of that nature, but which will tell you about the psyche maybe of an individual and, you know, their personality type, their leadership type and things like that. But it's very difficult for you to, the challenge that we've gone for when we've created Predictor is no matter what you do in terms of analyzing a CV, doing an interview, you're never really going to know who that candidate is and how well that candidate will actually perform until they've been on the job for a certain period in time. And this is why things like rebates exist, because sometimes a person can have their CV built by AI, and Claude is really good, you know, ChatGPT is really good at it. A lot of people can blag during the interview, but you never know how well a person is going to perform until they're actually on the job. And so that's the reason why we built Predictor. What Predictor does is it allows you to create a simulated workspace environment. And so you're actually getting to see how well the person performs the task, not necessarily what they've done in the past. You know, it's not them telling you this is a time that I dealt with a challenge. It's like, no, you're in the situation, you're in the hot seat. Let's see how you perform. And we can have you, write it out, or we can have you do it audibly if you want to hear the tone of your voice, you know, and video is coming soon as well, where you can see these people perform these things. It saves you time. It saves you energy. There's a lot of people who have to pay for trial shifts. You know, you've got to have someone come in and it costs you money to have them come in, whereas you can see how well they can actually perform without bringing them in. So it saves you time in that sense. And then there's a lot of things along the line 3 months in that you wouldn't have known until you saw that person perform. And Predictor's here to sort of show you that beforehand so that you can deal with these new changes that are being made. They're in effect right now, actually, you know, the employer rights protection starting from 6 months. So you've really got to know as soon as you can. And As far as I'm aware, Predictor's the only thing out there that can really show you that.
Great. Well, listen, we are bang on 1 hour right now. So thanks a lot, Ricky and Miles. That went super quick. Thanks for that session. Everyone that has attended today, I think will get an email or a message from Jahisha, Team's marketing exec, just with an overview of the session and contact details for Ricky and Miles if you want to book a call. Why wouldn't you, is my question. Just before I go, I want to let you know we've got 3 other events happening team next week. We have another team collab session, another LinkedIn Live, which is going to be with Christian Maffa from One Day Wealth and Matt Fox from Exitus Advisory, all about building a recruitment business that's worth buying. And then we've got a special session, which is an anonymous webinar on Tuesday, the 14th of July at 2 o'clock with Stuart Roberts from Maikai. The reason we set this up, we've got a lot of team members that are feeling the pinch at the moment. And Stuart is going to talk you through a session all about, is your recruitment agency financially healthy? It's completely anonymous. So you book onto the session. You don't know who else is watching, who's there. I don't even know who's booked onto it. And we're going to talk about some practical tips, advice, ideas for some of those recruitment businesses that are finding this market particularly tough. And then lastly, next week on the 15th, we've got our team marketing session with Prominence. So Julie Saul and Tom, and they're going to be doing a session all about recruitment marketing, about the power of evidence. So using real life stuff that you're doing in your recruitment business to showcase that to your clients. So 3 sessions, they're all on the team LinkedIn page. You can click onto them and reserve your spot. Thanks again to Ricky and Miles. Thanks, Jahisha, for working your magic behind the scenes and setting all of this up. If you've got any questions about teams, shoot me a DM. And everyone have a great afternoon. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.